There is a silent restlessness that haunts us when someone insists on occupying our thoughts. No matter how much we try to distract ourselves, that presence returns, like an internal echo, like a whisper coming from somewhere deeper than our logical mind can reach. Why, after all, do certain people refuse to leave us in peace, even once they're gone from our lives, even when we've rationally decided to move on? This obsession is not merely emotional, it reveals something hidden, a psychic content that insists on emerging. According to Carl Jung's analytical psychology, when someone becomes a fixed thought, it's because they carry within them a reflection of ourselves, a mirror of what we have yet to understand. In this video, we will dive into the true reasons why we can't stop thinking about someone and what that reveals about our own soul. If this resonates with you, comment, "I am ready to know myself more deeply." When a person dominates our thoughts continuously, it's common to assume we're simply in love, dependent, or emotionally stuck. However, Jung proposed a far deeper, more symbolic view of this phenomenon. According to analytical psychology, the person who occupies our mind may actually represent a projection, a psychic image formed from unconscious contents we have yet to integrate within ourselves. Projection is one of the psyche's most powerful mechanisms. Jung explained that we project onto others what we do not recognize in ourselves, both qualities and repressed aspects. When we can't stop thinking about someone, it may be because they represent parts of our shadow, things we deny or aren't yet able to integrate consciously. Moreover, it's possible that this figure embodies the archetype of the anima or animus, unconscious images of the feminine in a man and the masculine in a woman. When these images are activated, intense, often irrational feelings arise that pertain not to the real person, but to the archetypal figure they embody within us. Jung also spoke of the journey of individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are by integrating these unconscious aspects. Obsessively thinking about someone can, therefore, be a calling toward that path. The persistence of this thought isn't about the other person per se, but about what they awaken in us, a forgotten, repressed, or idealized part that cries out for recognition and integration. Once we understand this, our focus shifts. We stop trying to forget the person and begin to ask what they symbolize in our journey of self-discovery. When someone becomes a constant presence in our mind, it's natural to believe that this attachment concerns the person themselves, their way of speaking, their appearance, their energy. Yet, according to Jung, much of this fascination can be rooted in a profound psychic phenomenon, projection. In other words, we are not relating directly to the other person, but to what we have placed onto them. Projection is a mechanism through which unconscious contents, aspects of ourselves we haven't yet recognized, are cast onto another person. This creates the illusion that they possess unique, irresistible, almost magical qualities. But in reality, what we see is our own psychic image, projected like a film onto a living screen. The other becomes a mirror, and obsession is often the psyche's attempt to show us something we cannot see directly in ourselves. Imagine, for example, that someone constantly thinks of a person who exudes confidence, steadiness, and clarity. Those may be aspects the thinker doesn't feel able to access within themselves. By projecting those qualities onto the other, they connect, albeit unconsciously, with their own need to become stronger. This explains why, even when the relationship ends or never takes place, the attachment persists. What's at stake isn't the real person's presence, but the symbolic function they fulfill. This dynamic can also be observed in negative feelings. When we feel intensely bothered by someone, they may represent something we reject in ourselves. In this case, projection serves as a defense against acknowledging our own shadow. Thus, the other person becomes the bearer of something that truly belongs to us. Obsession can be both positive and negative, but in either case it indicates that we are facing a part of ourselves that demands awareness. The illusion created by projection is powerful because it is felt in the body, in emotions, in thoughts. It seems real. We feel as though we are uniquely, inexplicably connected to someone. Yet this enchantment, far from being a mistake, is an invitation to inner investigation. Instead of trying to repress the obsessive thought or desperately seek the other's presence, Jung invites us to look within and ask, what am I projecting? Why does this image affect me so deeply? The first step to breaking the illusion of projection is to recognize it. This requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to explore ourselves. Realizing that we are not in love with the real person, but with an image we carry internally, can be liberating. At that point, pain begins to transform into understanding, and blind attachment becomes self-knowledge. Jung affirmed that as long as we remain unconscious of these projections, we will be carried by them like leaves in the wind. But when we claim ownership of what is ours, our virtues, vulnerabilities, desires, and fears, we relieve the other person of the weight of what we have projected onto them. This doesn't mean we stop loving or relating. It means we love more clearly, with less illusion and more truth. Therefore, when someone occupies your mind intensely and persistently, consider that you may be facing a powerful projection. Obsession, in this sense, can be a bridge toward integrating aspects of yourself that have been forgotten or denied. The other person is the signal. The true content, however, lies within you. There is something profoundly revealing in the way we connect with or fixate on certain people. Sometimes they enchant us, other times they challenge or even wound us. In both cases, the intensity of the bond often hides something beyond mere coexistence or affinity. We are standing before an unconscious mirror, and the reflection it gives us comes directly from what Jung called the shadow. For Jung, the shadow is the set of personality aspects that the ego rejects, represses, or simply ignores. These are traits we consider unacceptable, shameful, dangerous, or that simply don't fit the self-image we wish to maintain. But the fact that they are denied to consciousness doesn't eliminate them. On the contrary, they grow stronger in the depths of the unconscious, and one of the most powerful ways they emerge is through another person. That is precisely why, when someone provokes an intense emotional reaction in us, positive or negative, that person may unconsciously be reflecting our shadow. What fascinates us may be a quality we cannot access in ourselves. What disturbs us may be a characteristic we deny within. The shadow isn't just the dark side. It also holds unfulfilled potentials, unlived gifts, unrecognized strengths. Think of a situation in which you felt humiliated, diminished, or completely disarmed in front of someone. The natural tendency is to blame the other, to feed resentment, or to degrade ourselves. But from a Jungian perspective, that pain has a symbolic origin. You were confronted with a part of yourself that had not yet been integrated. The shadow revealed itself, and the resistance to acknowledging it generated suffering. Similarly, when we idealize someone to the point that we can't get them out of our head, that idealization can also hide a projection of the shadow. Only in this case, a luminous shadow. We project qualities onto the other that we don't recognize in ourselves, creating emotional dependency disguised as admiration. The other becomes the bearer of something that, in essence, belongs to us, and the mental fixation signals that this energy needs to be reclaimed. The key here isn't to reject the obsessive experience, but to transform it into a portal to self-knowledge. When we ask ourselves, why does this person affect me so much? What we are really saying is, what are they revealing about me that I cannot yet accept or recognize? That is the essential movement of shadow integration, stopping the outward pointing and beginning to excavate inward. Of course, this process doesn't happen instantly. The shadow resists. It frightens, disturbs, and challenges the ego. But it is precisely in the courage to face it that growth occurs. Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by recognizing one's own darkness. That darkness is the shadow, and it manifests powerfully whenever we find ourselves seized by obsessive thoughts about someone. The more someone affects us, the more likely it is that they are reflecting an internal content not yet brought to consciousness. Therefore, instead of trying to control our thoughts or force ourselves to forget, the most effective path is to question and explore, what does this figure represent symbolically for me? Which part of me is being activated by this relationship? In this context, the other person is merely the messenger. The real transformation happens when we are willing to open the letter, read its contents, and understand what it tells us about our psyche. That is the role of the shadow, to confront us with what remains to be made whole. And if someone remains fixed in our thoughts, it may be because behind that figure lies a part of us crying out to be seen, accepted, and finally integrated. When someone awakens in us an enchantment that transcends what is logical or rational, we often feel overwhelmed by an inexplicable force. It's as if that person touches a secret, deep part of the soul. The sensation can be rapturous, with emotions that appear out of nowhere, vivid dreams, intense fantasies, and an almost impossible difficulty in ignoring them, the struggle to clear them from our mind. For Jung, This is not explained solely by personal experience, but by archetypal forces of the unconscious, the anima and animus. These two archetypes represent, respectively, the unconscious image of the feminine in a man, anima, and of the masculine in a woman, animus. They are not simply gendered images, but living forces, symbolic energies that inhabit the collective unconscious. And when these figures are activated by someone we know or idealize, we are seized by a powerful projection. The other person becomes a channel through which these forces emerge and manifest. When a man projects his anima onto a woman, for example, he may see her as magical, mystical, intuitive, savior-like, sensual, or even destructive, depending on how that archetype is configured in his psyche. The same applies when a woman projects her animus. She may perceive the other as strong, wise, dominant, protective, or dangerous. In both cases, the feeling generated is not purely human, but mythic. The other is seen not as a real person, but as a symbol laden with unconscious meaning. That is why we often cannot stop thinking about someone we barely know, or with whom we've had only fleeting interactions. It's not about the person themselves, but the archetype they embody. The unconscious is reminding us that something within us still needs to be acknowledged. Archetypal love, in this sense, is less about the other and more about the encounter with a part of ourselves. However, this projection comes at a price. Since the other is invested with unconscious symbolic content, we begin to expect them to fulfill a role that isn't really theirs. This leads to suffering, disappointment, fixation, and often frustration. The person may even withdraw, but their image remains alive within us, because the archetype is still active, calling out for integration. Upon realizing this, we come into contact with a profound truth. The love we feel is often not for the real person, but for what they awaken within us. It's not that this love is false. It's symbolic, psychic, transformative, but it needs to be redirected. When we succeed in bringing the anima or animus into consciousness, we stop projecting them blindly and begin to engage with these forces within us. Integrating these archetypes is an essential step on the path of individuation. When a man recognizes his anima, he develops his intuition, sensitivity, creativity, and connection to the unconscious. When a woman integrates her animus, she gains access to her reasoning, assertiveness, structured thinking, and inner authority. Most importantly, they stop desperately seeking these qualities in the other. This process does not eliminate love, but transforms it. It ceases to be needy love and becomes conscious love. The person who once dominated our thoughts can still be significant, but they no longer hold the same power over us. They become a symbol of something greater, a milestone on an important stage of our inner journey. That is why, if someone insists on occupying your thoughts, consider the possibility that you are experiencing an archetypal activation. What does this figure represent? What energy does it evoke in you? It's time to look within and dialogue with these images, instead of chasing them in the external world. True love begins when we stop projecting and start integrating. Behind every obsession with someone lies a hidden movement that goes far beyond simple passion, yearning, or desire. There is a deep calling, a silent force seeking to guide us back to ourselves. For Carl Jung, this calling has a specific name: individuation. This process is the backbone of analytical psychology and represents the path to wholeness, the return to our own essence through the integration of all that we have excluded over the course of life. When we can't stop thinking about someone, we often try to control our mind, cut ties, or find distractions. But we rarely ask, why does this fixation haunt me? Why does the image of this person insist on returning, even when I have rationally understood that the relationship no longer exists, is unhealthy, or never even began? The answer may lie in the fact that this figure symbolically carries a fragment of our own being, something yet to be integrated, and therefore returns in the form of a compulsive thought. Individuation is precisely the path to this kind of integration. It's a long, often painful process, but deeply liberating. It involves recognizing our shadows, understanding our projections, facing our fears, and accepting both the aspects we admire and those we reject in ourselves. In this context, the person who occupies our mind functions as a messenger. They are there not to complete us, but to reveal what has yet to be seen internally. Therefore, instead of fighting the recurring thought, Jungian psychology proposes a different attitude: to listen. Listen to what this thought wants to tell us. Listen to the symbol that this person represents. At this level, obsession ceases to be a problem to eliminate and becomes an opportunity for deepening. Of course, this path demands courage, because truly looking inward means confronting oneself with honesty, with responsibility, without outsourcing the pain. In this scenario, the other's image becomes a mirror of what the soul wants to recover. Sometimes this image evokes lost self-love. Other times it points to unlived talents, ignored desires, or poorly healed wounds. And there are moments when it simply reminds us that we haven't yet learned to be whole without depending on approval, presence, or recognition from others. Individuation does not require perfection but awareness, and awareness is born from conflict, from pain, from restlessness. It's when something destabilizes us that we have the chance to reorganize our internal structures. In this context, obsession with someone is like a wound that bleeds, so we can look at what we've always avoided: the emptiness, the fear of not being loved, emotional dependence, the flight from ourselves. When we realize that this mental fixation is not a mistake, but a symptom of the soul crying out for healing, something transforms. The focus shifts from the person to the process itself. We begin to ask, what do I need to learn from this? What is this experience teaching me about myself? Which part of my identity was projected onto the other and now wants to come home? Jung said that individuation is a process through which a human being becomes who they truly are. This means that obsession, far from being merely an obstacle, can be the starting point of a much greater journey, a journey back to authenticity, freedom, and genuine self-love. When we stop seeking in others what we've lost within ourselves, the obsessive thought begins to lose its power, and gradually we realize that the pain of attachment wasn't about the other person, but about our disconnection from who we are. The person who occupied our thoughts ceases to be an idol and becomes a symbol. The image that once imprisoned us now points the way, and then obsession dissolves, not by repression, but by transcendence. What appears to be a simple obsession with someone is, in reality, a profound calling of the soul. Behind the persistent thought lie unrecognized projections, unintegrated shadows, activated archetypes, and above all, an invitation to the process of individuation. The figure that so occupies your mind is not the final destination, but a powerful symbol of something that wishes to emerge within you, a forgotten part, a repressed truth, a dormant strength. When you view this experience through the lens of analytical psychology, everything changes. Suffering becomes a path, pain becomes wisdom, attachment becomes self-knowledge. The journey is not about the other, but about oneself, and the deeper the inner dive, the lighter the burden of fixation becomes. If this content resonated with you, it may be time to embrace this inner calling. Don't flee from what affects you. Listen, understand, and transform. Subscribe to the channel to keep following reflections that awaken the soul. And if you want to go even deeper, watch the video appearing on your screen now. It could be the next step on your personal transformation journey. Your unconscious will thank you.